your rabbi on the internet, Rabbi Chaim Checkmate, Mr. Coffman himself, live and in person. Welcome back. How are you tonight? Did I oversell that one? I'm just
Almost.
asking.
It's always, what they say when it comes to marketing and other things, it's always good to oversell.
Yeah.
Right? That way you're giving much more, value. That's why you can charge a lot of money for a lot of things. So overselling's always good.
Better to oversell than to undersell. Is that what I'm saying?
Right.
Okay, gotcha. Very
It's
good.
better to look good than to feel good, right?
Yeah. The smart. Wow. Okay, I got it. That makes sense. Okay. So tonight is definitely. I got to get this thing back working here. 1 second. And there it is. The phone number's on there, but it's not a call-in show. So, but anyway, that's the website for sure. Okay, so here we go. So I looked up this topic. I know I've talked about this topic a few times over the past several years on Rabbi Federo's Monday night show. But I did a global search on my channel for this topic, and I couldn't find one except for number 50. I don't know what number it was. I think it was 59 or something like that. I don't know what it was. It was way earlier on though. But I know you and I haven't actually talked about it. So this whole idea of Jesus supposedly with Christianity, he was both high priest and he was also king of the Jews, and so that created a problem for me in my studies. And I thought that it might be a good opportunity for even if I would like for you to mention Jesus concept, but the point is we don't need to. The point is, what does Judaism teach about an individual? Is it possible for a person to be high king and priest? Now, the whole idea with Melchizedek, that was where it all stemmed from, because it says he was both king and priest or something like that. Pardon me for not knowing that details, but I would like to know with the Christian concept of how they're pushing Jesus as the high priest and king. Is that a possibility, even if Jesus could have qualified for the Messiah? Which we know he didn't. He failed way too many times, but that's not the point. So if you would just take this away and tell us what you got. Appreciate that.
Okay. It's always a pleasure to be here. It's
Sure.
always great, when... if you look at what we'll call the Old Testament, right? In general, we believe it's absolute. God spoke to Moses. Moses passed it down, right? We've spoken about what that communication is, and all that. But a person has to realize clear as day, the Torah is the absolute word of God, right? That the Christians would agree, that the Muslims would agree, right, etc. They'll say we're not chosen anymore, all that. But we're told many, many times, that God separated the Kohanim, the priests. We're going to see what the word priest over here means, because I think it's totally taken out of context, exactly what the Christians do, right? Take plenty of things, out of context. And that is, they are from the tribe of Levi, right? The Kohanim are from the tribe of Levi, and they're separate from the rest of the Jewish people. God makes that clear, right? They served, in the temple. They served in the tabernacle before the temple. So that means that their function is 100% different. They're separated. They're different from everybody else. So that means what they do is not the same. If it's not the same, that means they don't do what everybody else does. And everyone else does not do what they do, because they're not allowed. And even with the Kohanim, we see in Leviticus chapter 10, the story of Nadav and Avihu. Nadav and Avihu, the beloved sons of Aaron the Kohen, right, of Aaron the priest. And what happened? They brought incense into the Holy of Holies on a day they're not allowed to. Right? The only day they're allowed to do such a thing is on Yom Kippur. But when the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was erected, they thought it was such an auspicious time. So they did it for the sake of heaven. But God said you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to come in and do whatever, and do whatever you want. And they paid a price, right? So the number of reasons why, obviously not the purpose for now, why they died and what the sin was. But it means you can't always do what you want. right? Like that, famous song, can't always get what you want, right? You can't always do what you want, when you want, how you want. There's a hierarchy, right? Total hierarchy of things, what a person can do. So just like we'll give a parable, just like their own designated position. And usually they're expert, they're very good at their position, or they're not going to play, right? So therefore, some are able to play multiple positions, right? You have what we'll call a utility player, right? A utility player can play many positions, but the vast majority of players are good at what they're good at their specific position. So they could jump up and down and scream, have this unbelievable ego and say, yeah, I want to play this other position. I want to do this or I want to do that. But guess what? They're playing their position in order that they have the best chance to win. So, for example, if a person, can throw 100 miles an hour, they're not necessarily in the outfield, right? They're not necessarily in the infield. They're probably going to pitch. They're not going to be the catcher or any other position. Why? Because that's what they're good at, unless they blow out their arm or something else happens, right? So you have a lot of people. You want to be successful, but you can only be successful in a certain way. Therefore, when God delegates a responsibility, right, this is another thing that's crucial. And that is many, many times the Torah is going to tell you that God's going to say to the Jewish people, this is eternal. This is forever, as we would say in Boston. It's forever. If it's forever, it doesn't change. Right? Let's repeat that so people understand. When God says it's forever, it's forever. It never changes. And God had good reasons, for doing and saying whatever he said. And no one can ever do the job of anyone else, right? Men and women. Men have certain responsibility. Women have certain responsibility. But men don't have the same responsibility as women. Women, not as men. So people say, oh, that's discrimination. And how can you do that? We're all created equal. Torah doesn't say that. Torah makes clear the Kohanim are elevated. They're elevated greater than everybody else. Now, today, in today's world, there are only certain things that distinguish Kohanim, the priests, from everybody else. And we're going to see this word priest in a second. But they are distinguished, amongst the Jewish people, which means that, they're the ones that gave the sacrifice, they're the ones taught Torah, right? Many other things. Today, it's almost a moot point, right? Because we don't have a temple today. We don't have sacrifices today, right? At the same time, here in Israel, the Kohanim bless the congregation every day. Outside of Israel, it only happens, during the holidays, Passover, Shavuos, or on Sukkot. But they have certain responsibilities. I can't take on that responsibility as much as I want. I would always tell my father, blessed memory, I got gypped. I said, you could have made me a Kohen, right? If you would have paid enough, I could have been a Kohen. But, that didn't happen. So they're distinguished. They're distinguished amongst the Jewish people. So therefore, a Levi does not have the same job as a Kohen. A Kohen doesn't have the same job as a Levite. So therefore, they're different. Now, what's the problem? What's the main problem over here? The main problem is that the Bible calls, King David and his sons priests. Right? That's what it says. Calls them priests. Now, does it mean they were the priests of Aaron and Cohen? Are they the same? Certainly not. Why? First of all, someone who's a Kohen, it means they hold the position. They hold an office of authority. So now, as we always say, everything is in context. So I have to look at the passage. I have to see what it says. And I have to see what type of Kohen that person is. Right? So, if not, then you say, yeah, everybody's the same. But if you look at what the Torah says, it's not true. It's certainly not true. So therefore, the Torah is gonna, use the word priest And when it uses the word priest over here, it doesn't change, right? If it's, let's say, if it's not modified or clarified, let's say it's used in general. If it's used in general as someone who's the priest, that means he's a descendant of Aaron. He's a descendant of Aaron, the high priest. That's what it means, right? If there's no other context, if it's said in general, that's what it means. Now, we mentioned before, anyone who held an office is called a priest. So, before the Torah is given, what are the Jewish people called? A nation of priests. If they're a nation of priests, does that mean they came from Aaron? It's before Torah is given. It's before they're singled out. So if the Torah says they're called the nation of priests, it cannot mean we're all descended from Aaron the Cohen. It can't mean that. That would mean the entire Jewish nation are all priests. That's very hard to say. Not only that, what about with Elijah the prophet? Right? It says over there, what about the priests of Baal? Right? Ones who, who are idolaters. They're also called priests. Right? That's what it says. Right? Look it up, whatever translation. Right? They are called priests. I don't think anyone's going to make the mistake and say, oh, look, you got the priests of Baal. You got the priests of Baal. Guess what? Are they the same as the descendants of Aaron? They come from Aaron, the high priest? No one's going to say that. No one's going to say they're the same Cohen. There's no question. The Torah uses the word priest many, many times. And again, what is 100% crucial? What 100% crucial is you have to look at what's being said. What is being talked about? No one's going to make this mistake, but, Christians are going to take this totally out of context. And we're going to see from Melchizedek, they're going to take it totally out of context. Over here and say, see, priest this, priest that, come on. They can do anything. Who says? Right? Who says? Now let's go to Melchizedek. Right? If we go back to Genesis chapter 4, Genesis chapter 14, Abraham comes on the scene, and Abraham is blessed by someone called Melchizedek. Now, Melchizedek is not a name over here. Melchizedek means a righteous king. That's what it means. It means a righteous king. That's not his name, but what is it? It's his title. That's how he's known. He's known as being a righteous king. Now you have to understand when you look at the Torah from the beginning, right? From the beginning of Genesis. So the beginning of Genesis tells what? Tells the story of creation. And then it goes through the generations. When the Torah goes through the generations, it mentions a handful of people. Why does it mention a handful of people? Because these people are significant. They're totally significant, right? But it only mentions a handful, right? You got Noah, you got Methuselah, you got others. You got Lamech, you got Cain, you got Abel, you got all these different people. They're mentioned for different reasons. So now, what do we have? We have Melchizedek, right? We have Melchizedek, who's called the righteous king. So he's mentioned, but Melchizedek over here plays a very significant role. What's his significant role? His significant role is that he's called righteous. You have to remember, generation of the flood, everyone gets wiped out. So, there were handfuls of people who the Torah says were righteous. The Torah says that for a reason. It doesn't just, say it in a vacuum. But there are people that are absolutely righteous. Very good. But the mass majority of people are not so righteous. We have free will. A person can choose to do the right thing, to do the wrong thing, right? But that's his title. Now, if he's known as the righteous king, and now he comes and he blesses someone by the name of Abraham, right? He comes along, so to speak, and he passes this down. What do I mean? He's a king. He's the king. He's righteous, world famous and all that. So he's bringing God's word to the world, right? He's representing what God wants in this world. So God looks around in the world and is looking for what we'll call spokesmen or spokeswomen, right? We're not going to distinguish here. So God is going to look for people to take the flag, to run with the flag. So what's going to happen? God needs someone to pass this torch on from. So you have Melchizedek, right? Melchizedek, as Jewish tradition tells us, is really Shem, the son of Noah. Now, this is pretty incredible because he must have lived in an unbelievably long time over here, right? It's brought down that Jacob was 69 when he died. 69, that means he lived hundreds of years, right? Hundreds of years. So Melchizedek, known as his righteous king, and he's bringing God's word to the world. So he's going to have to pass that torch on to someone, right? He's going to have to give it over. He's going to have to give it over to someone in this world. Now, who does he give it over to? Who does God see as the right, it's the most worthy person to give that over to? None other than Abraham himself. Abraham, known as father of all nations, etc. But he brought absolute monotheism to the world, right? That everyone, was worshiping idols. Here's Bob. Don't leave home without me. Don't leave home without him. Everyone has these idols, etc. He brought absolute monotheism to the world, understanding from creation, from a world of design, either at the age of 3 or the age of 40, right? It's a whole discussion when he came to this recognition. But he came to this realization there's a God who runs the world, right? He's in charge. So Abraham comes on the scene. And one of the first things he does? He has to go to war, right? He has to save his last remaining relative, Lot, right? He has to go save him. And that's the famous war of the 4 kings, versus the 5 kings. And what happens? He doesn't take anything. Doesn't take any of the booty. Doesn't take, any property, zero. And he goes and he saves. His nephew. So Abraham blasts on the scene. But everybody knows, he taught the men, Sarah taught the women, brought absolute monotheism, as we said, brought that to the world. So here is someone that the Torah says he came from Ur Kasdim, right? Well, why is that significant? So you tell me, well, maybe it's a historical reference, right? This is where he came from. This is who his family was. Okay, very good, right? But it's brought down. What happened in Ur Kasdim, right? Rashi brings down from the Medrash. In Ur Kasdim, his father used to sell idols, and his father went away one day. So Abraham took all the idols, smashed them, and he left a stick in the hand of one of the idols. So his father comes back, and he says, Abe, what happened over here? So, there's a big war between the idols, and this idol, destroyed all the other idols. So his father says, what are you talking about? Idols can't do anything. They don't have any power. Right? They have zero power. How can they fight each other? Right? So Abraham asks his father, he said, well, if that's true, why do you worship them? Why are you bowing down to them if they have no power? Right? So his father says, smart aleck kid over here. Let me take him to King Nimrod. Had a good connection with the king, right? And the king tells him, no uncertain terms, I want you to admit, idols, have power, this and that. And he goes, no. So I'm not going to do it. So I want you to admit it, or, I'm going to throw you in this fiery furnace. So Abraham's willing to die, absolutely willing to die, without speaking to God, hearing from God, nothing. Only by understanding there's a world of design. So Nimrod throws him in the fiery furnace, and we know the story. Well, if you don't know, you'll hear the story now. What happened? Came out alive. He didn't die, right? God did an absolute miracle over here. He didn't die, right? He didn't die over here. So God, found somebody who the Ramchal in Rabbi Chaim Coffman, blessed memory, brings down in brings on a path of the just. Right? What does it say over here? Oh, sorry, in Derech Hashem, in the way of God. He says Abraham's the pillar. Abraham is the, everyone else, Avram, Yitzhak, Yaakov, they came out of him, right? They're the branches, right? They're the branches that came out of him, but he's the root, right? He's the main root. That's why the major prayer that we say every day, the Shemona Esrei, silent meditation, whatever a person wants to call it, we ask for our needs, right? Ask for physical needs, spiritual needs, right? At the end of the first paragraph, what do we say? Blessed are you, God, the shield of Abraham. What do you mean the shield of Abraham? Why not say the shield of Isaac, shield of Jacob? Jewish people really come from Jacob and his sons, right? So we're going to read this week, starting the story with Joseph and going down to Egypt, right, and all that. But the point is, you say the shield of Abraham. So why the rabbis say the shield of Abraham? Because he's the base. He's 100% the base of all the Jewish people. Where did Isaac get all his spiritual knowledge from? From his father, from Abraham. Where did Jacob get it from? His father, from Yitzhak, who got it from Abraham. So he's the pillar. He's the absolute pillar over here. So God said, this is fitting. This is fitting for Melchizedek. For Melchizedek to pass the torch down. Right? To pass this torch, of leadership and bringing God's oneness to the world and his uniqueness to the world. Who's he going to pass it down to? Who in the world is he going to pass it down to? Comes along Abraham on the scene. He's got his man, right? He's got his person who he's going to pass it down to, right? So as we mentioned, he was very righteous, lived a long life. Their lives overlapped. Overlapped over here because, again, he's the son of Shem, right? As the Torah tells us. And Jacob's 69. That's how long he lives. He's 69, right? When he dies, right? So after this great victory, this great physical victory, this war over here, what does Melchizedek give him? Right? What's the blessing he gives him? He gives him the priesthood. He says that you're now going to be, the head over here. But what priesthood are we talking about? If it's before the Torah is given, which is pretty clear, then that priesthood cannot descend from Aaron the Kohen by logic. Right? We're not talking Kabbalah. We're not talking oral law. Logic. The priesthood has not come in. Right? It has not come into existence. Doesn't mean it's not going to exist later. But this priesthood cannot mean he comes from Aaron the Kohen. That cannot mean that. Right? So when he gets the priesthood, it means in general, the title of a righteous person. That's what it means. Doesn't mean, he's bringing all these sacrifices and what he has to do, like it says in the book of Leviticus. Not talking about that. Totally not talking about that. This is why, if you look at Genesis chapter 15, we have a promise from God that Abraham is going to be a great nation. He's going to be a great nation. Okay, what's the problem? God tells him he's going to be a great nation, but Abraham says, that's great, but I don't have kids. My wife is old, I don't have kids. All I have is this servant Eliezer, right? I have this servant Eliezer, what's going to be? How can I be a great nation? So even though at the time Abraham is childless, God tells him in no uncertain terms, you are going to be a great nation, right? A great nation is going to come from you, physically from you. Right, from you and Sarah, incredulous. Sarah's 90 years old. How's she gonna have it? On the world, you're gonna have a child, right over here. But God can do anything. God can change a person's nature. That's what He did, right? Because according to nature, Sarah never should have had children. Impossible for her to have children. God changed it, right? So God makes him a great nation from Himself. Now, what's the purpose? What's the purpose of that great nation? The purpose of that nation is going to be God needs somebody who's going to represent Him on earth. For better or for worse. We can make mistakes. We can do all kinds of things. But God is going to choose a group. He's going to choose a group or people, let's say better. He's going to choose people to represent Him. To represent Him in this world. To give over what He wants. To give over His message. Right? So this leadership gets passed down right, in different segments of society. So now we see that Melchizedek came on the scene, right, and he passes it down. He passed down this leadership, right, this kingship, so to speak, or this priesthood, let's say better. He passes down to Abraham, right, but we see later, and this is where all the trouble starts, right, and that is, you see, with King David, right, the king of Israel, right, who is, by the way, it has to come from, from him, right, he's going to be the king, or he is the king. So there's a Davidic covenant pretty crucial, because the covenant does not change. You can't unchoose a people, even though, totally misrepresented Jeremiah chapter 30, right, about this new covenant. How is there such a thing as a new covenant in general, right? Internal logic tells me that cannot be. Why not? Because the Torah says in the book of Deuteronomy, you can't add or subtract to the Torah. If you can't add or subtract to the Torah, how can you have a new covenant? What's new? All of a sudden we got all these great ideas that God said, yeah, we don't have anything to do with it. We're going to change everything. Doesn't everyone agree Jeremiah? Jeremiah's a prophet. Everyone agrees that. No one disagrees. He's a prophet of God. Speaks in the name of God. If you don't speak in the name of God, you get the prophecy wrong. What's the punishment? Death penalty. Torah says death penalty, right? So he's a prophet, right? So how can you change anything? When God makes a covenant, he made a covenant with Noah. He made a covenant with Abraham, right? Walking through the parts, right, of all these animals. Makes a covenant with Isaac. Makes a covenant with Jacob. That covenant never changes. The Torah says many times it's eternal, right? So the Karaites who don't believe in oral law, they're going to be ecstatic over here. Why? Because the Karaites are going to say, see, what does it mean it's eternal? It's forever. Eternal means it never changes. It can never, ever, ever change. So the Davidic king, right, by the way of this covenant, is totally unique. This covenant is not like any other covenant we've seen. So if you take a look at Samuel 2, chapter 7, verses 12 to 16, what does God say? God says to David, from you through Solomon, this covenant will never be broken. Again, the covenant is never going to be broken. You may have kids that sin. You may have kids that totally go off. And well, what does it say over there? God will deal with them. God will take care of them. But that does not mean the covenant is broken. These people may be broken. These people may get severely punished, 100%, right? And we see that. We see that, great people, even if they have, the greatest ideas in the sanctifying God's name, if God says, I didn't want you to reinvent the wheel and do what I didn't tell you to do, the punishment is absolutely severe. Nadav and Avihu, we mentioned before, they had the greatest of intention. So what? You're only allowed to go in the Holy of Holies once during the year. You're not allowed to go in any time, and even if it's an auspicious time. Even at the erecting of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, tremendously auspicious time. God brings his presence down. Can't imagine what that means. All these great things going on. I say, wow, we're on such a level. We're on such a spiritual level. Let's do it. They're doing it for the sake of heaven. But what's the problem? What's the obvious problem? The obvious problem is God said, no, I didn't want you to do this. I wasn't interested in you doing this, right? And now you're going to pay a serious price. I'll take it one step further. Before we get to Psalms over here. You take Adam and Eve. Adam had a great idea. He had a great idea. If I take evil, Adam thinks to himself, if I take evil, I put it inside of myself. Remember, at this point, evil's outside, meaning that a person knows by osmosis certain things are bad. If he sees a pit, if he sees a pit in the forest, he knows not to walk into it. Why? Because he knows it could hurt him. It's dangerous. But Adam had a great idea. I'm going to take this evil, so to speak. I'm going to put it inside my body. I'm going to put it inside. Why? What's the rationale? The rationale is very simple. He says, if I overcome my evil inclination, and that's what we do on a regular basis, we're fighting the evil inclination versus the good inclination. So what is the evil inclination? If we go against it and we fight against it, what happens? We elevate the body, we elevate the soul, right? When we do the right thing, our bodies are different, right? We're using it for sanctification, and all kinds of things. If we, God forbid, do the wrong thing, if we do the wrong thing, what's going to happen? We debase the body, we debase the soul. It's like taking 2-3 steps backwards. That's what it is, right? That's essentially what it is. So, but Abraham had a great idea, right? In theory, it was a great idea. The idea was, I'll sanctify God's name exponentially, right? I'll raise myself, to higher spiritual levels exponentially every time I do the right thing. But at the same time, I can destroy myself by doing the wrong thing. Okay, now, makes sense logically. But what did God say? I don't think so. That's not what I created the world for. That's not what I wanted. So God has to go to plan B. What's plan B? And God understood this could happen, right? And it would happen. But he goes to plan B. You know what plan B is? Death. Death is plan B. So is death the Jewish concept? Never should have been. But what happened? Man ate from the tree. The repercussions. God has to take him out of the Garden of Eden. It's like, all right, everyone out of the pool. Takes them out of the Garden of Eden. And what's he afraid of? They're going to eat from the tree of life. And if they eat from the tree of life, they can't get atonement. Because then God says, you got to go back to the dust, right? Worms got to eat our bodies, and all that. So if that's the case, that's severe punishment. Really severe punishment that everybody has to go through, right? Jews, non-Jews, everyone's going to die. Sorry to be the burden of bad news. Everybody is going to die. And why is everyone going to die? Because of this. Exactly because of this. So Adam had the right intention. He had the greatest of intentions. But God said, I didn't want you to go beyond what you should have done. So there's repercussions, right? You can't always do what you want, even with the greatest of intention. So this Davidic line, back to the Davidic line over here. This Davidic line is totally unique. Totally unique. It's a covenant. Let's make clear. It's a covenant that's never going to change. It's never going to change. Even if his kids go off and they veer off, God says, yeah, I'll take care of them, right? I will 100% take care of business. They're going to pay the price. But that does not mean by any way, shape, or form that covenant gets broken. That covenant stays forever. It's made clear. Because if you look in Psalm 110, Psalm 110 is the promise that King David himself is getting that torch. That he's getting that unique role in the world. And what is he getting? He's getting that power to defeat his enemies. And anyone thinks if they're going through difficult times and they have a hard life, just read the book of Psalms. His father-in-law, King Saul, runs after him. His kids are running after him. He never has any what we call menuchas hanefesh. He has no time to rest, right? He's always running from one to another, fighting battles. King Solomon had it easy. He had it easy. Built the temple, no problems, no battles, no nothing. King David went through, unbelievable things that he went through, in all these different tests, right? So he's given the power over here to defeat his enemies, right? God, and he says all the time, I don't deserve it. You're going to help me anyway. You're going to take care of my enemies, just like Abraham in Genesis 14. Now, this covenant, as we said before, we're going to say again, this covenant is forever. This covenant doesn't change. He'll be called a priest, and his kids will be called priests, but priests do not mean the priesthood of Aaron. As we said, it's all about context. It doesn't say he gave all these sacrifices and he atoned for the Jewish people on Yom Kippur and he went through the Holy of Holies and he did, he brought sin offerings and burnt offerings and this and he did all kinds of things and he wore all the vestments and all the garments, what he was supposed to. It doesn't say any of that. None of that. So what kind of priest is he? Come on, begs the question, what in the world are Christians doing over here? Totally taking everything out of context like they're good at. Now, there's another problem over here, right? What's the other problem? The other problem is if you go against what you're supposed to do, meaning you take something that doesn't belong to you. there were many times people wanted to be, the high priest, and they usurped the power. They weren't fitting, right? And if a high priest wasn't fitting, went into the Holy of Holies, he died, right? He came out and he died. I mean, I shouldn't say he came out, he died. They had to pull him out. So someone who was a high priest got a lot of power, right? Tremendous amount of power. So people, bought their way in, took over the high priesthood, whatever it was. And whenever they took it over, what's one of the things they're going to do? They're going to go into the Holy of Holies, right? That's like the pinnacle of their job. They're going to go into the Holy of Holies. But guess what? Everybody knows. If you're not on the level, you go in the Holy of Holies, you're going to die. 100% you're going to die. Now, why would this be tempting for someone? It's very hard for me to understand, why this would be so tempting. Because everybody knows you're going to go into the Holy of Holies, you're not coming out. You're not coming out alive. So it could be a person going to think, even if I don't come out alive, I get to see at that split second or however long, I get to see God face to face, right? But what does the Torah say? You can't see God face to face. No one sees God face to face and live, right? If you're on that level to go into the Holy of Holies, right, and survive, and you come out unscathed, very good, right? But if not, you're certainly going to die, right? So that doesn't make so much sense to me, except for the fact that someone's got an ego, they want the power, the this and that, so they're going to go in, and even if they die, they'll say it's worth it. Okay, I mean, you can't interview them afterwards. They're dead. What are they going to say? What they saw? They can't say anything. Regardless, right? If somebody usurps power, what happens when someone takes power that does not belong to them? When someone takes power that does not belong to them, what does God do? God annihilates them, totally destroys them, right? Sunday night is going to be the first night of Hanukkah, so there's no greater example than that. You see by the Hasmoneans, you see by Melchizedek and the Maccabees, right? They fight the world power, these yeshiva students, etc. They fight the world power, the Greeks, at the time, and they beat them. They end up destroying them. The Greeks flee. And they come and take power, right? So after they defeat the Greeks, right, in this story of Hanukkah, so there's a time which is called the Maccabean period. How long is that time? About 100 years, give or take, right? They took over power. What's the problem? They didn't come from the Davidic line. If they don't come from the Davidic line, how can you take power? Now, I understand why. It was a tremendously autonomous kingdom. Many, many good things going on. Stability like they never had, because of the Greeks and all that. Very good. But what's the problem? The problem is they took power they didn't deserve. They usurped the power. They overstepped their boundaries. Now, they did it for the sake of heaven, right? But this is a question that's asked. Commentaries ask, what in the world are they thinking? They know they don't come from the Davidic line. 100% they know that. If they don't come from the Davidic line, how can they overlap? How can they crisscross, so to speak, and say, no, we're going to do it because, maybe someone will say they're only going to do it for that time period, for a certain amount of time. They know it's not the right thing, right? But look what they're going to bring. Look at the stability. The ends justify the means. You know what God says? I don't think so. And what did he do? He obliterated them. He totally annihilated them. We have no remembrance of anything from the Hasmoneans after them. Totally destroyed, right? Anyone who says it comes from them, right? The Gemara says you're a slave. You're nothing. It's not true. It can never be true. They got annihilated, totally destroyed, every last one of them. You can see, but that's the reward. Look what they did. They fought the world power, right? We have this whole holiday of Hanukkah. What about all the donuts? What about all the potato pancakes, all the latkes? No, they came and destroyed the world power. People think they're nuts. Because 100 times out of 100, you put in any supercomputer, you'll say the underdog, can win once, twice. In this case, they're not going to win. They're fighting the world power. How's it going to happen? How's it going to happen? Right? So some people will say, oh, isn't that suicide? Aren't they going to die? No. because they believed 100% God's going to take care of their needs, right? 100%. God's going to take care of them. So it wasn't called suicide, but that's not even the point. The point is, even after all that, right? After all that, and they're priests, okay? They're priests serving, right? Serving in the temple. Very good. What's the problem? You're not a king. You don't come from the tribe of David over here. You can't be a king. So the commentaries are bothered, and they should be bothered. We should all be bothered. Why in the world are they allowed to do such a thing? You tell me, well, maybe that time period is a little bit different, right? They needed autonomy. They needed stability. We could come up with possible reasons why that wasn't the norm. It never, ever should have been. Ever should have been the norm, right? Never should have been. That's not the norm. Okay, so maybe we'll say that. They had to do it for whatever reason. But guess what? You can't do that. You know why you can't do that? Because the covenant doesn't change. If the covenant doesn't change, you can't reinvent the wheel. And we've seen people in history who've tried to reinvent the wheel. They got slaughtered. They got slaughtered in different ways. Is there anything worse than bringing death to the world? Right? Two guarantees we have in this world: death and taxes. Right? Not necessarily in that order. But look what Adam and Eve did. They, doesn't matter what they thought. This is the end result. And when a person dies, it's brought down. The first person you're going to see is Adam. And you're going to say, because of you, I had to go through this. And I have to go through death. And he knows that's part of his atonement. But he brought absolute death to the world. That's what he did. He thought he knew better. And again, I'm not going to deny what he said. What he said makes sense. It made perfect sense. What's the problem? God said, I didn't invent the world for that. God understood a person can do it. God understood he's going to do it. Okay. But that's not what he wanted. Totally not what he wanted. Right? So there are serious repercussions when a person thinks they know better. Nadav and Avihu, another good example. They think they know better. You can only go in the Holy of Holies, the Torah says, on Yom Kippur. Right? The other things they might have done, that was forbidden, okay. Whatever the reason is, it doesn't matter. They thought they knew better. Comes along God and says, no, totally not. And Moses himself says they might have been more righteous than him and Aaron. Right? They might have been on a much higher level. But they thought they understood better. They thought they could reinvent the wheel. Right? So over here, same thing. Hasmoneans are not from the line of David. If they're not from the line of David, they can't be king. That's pretty clear. And whoever the future Messiah is going to come, right, he has to be from the Davidic line. Even the Christians say that, right? Even though their lines are messed up through the Gospels. They don't have this, same genealogy according to them. Doesn't matter. You have to go through King David. You have to be part of that Davidic line. And if you're not part of the Davidic line, you're out. Right? So it boggles the minds over here that they're going to usurp power. Doesn't matter why. We don't care why. They're going to usurp power. They're going to overstep their boundaries. And guess what? They got ripped to shreds. Ripped to shreds. There's not one semblance of them. Nowhere. Nowhere. We have any semblance. They're totally annihilated. Right? So this is a pretty crucial thing. Right? This is a pretty crucial thing that the Torah makes absolutely clear. And that is the Torah doesn't change. And I heard many times, as part of the conservative movement, times change. Where does it say that? Where does it say that, my Torah? You want to misrepresent what the verses say and this and that? The Torah says it doesn't change. The Torah is absolute. If the Torah is absolute, then how can I say, oh, now it means like this? Oh, now it means that. Someone who marries a non-Jew, right? A Jew who marries a non-Jew. Torah says many times, you're not allowed to. So they'll say, nah, it's only for that generation. Now they'll come up with all kinds of reasons. But the Torah doesn't say that. The Torah says you're not allowed to. When the Torah says you're not allowed to, what changed? Do I have a precedent that shows it changes? Moses himself says you can't add or subtract. If you can't add and subtract, what does that mean? It means it doesn't change. Now, so we're not going to get this whole thing about the rabbis interpreting and what it means. That we've spoken about, a number of times about oral law. But the point is it doesn't change. The covenant doesn't change. Abraham makes the covenant between the parts, right? Goes through Isaac, goes through Jacob. That doesn't change. You can't overstep your boundaries. You know, if I was great playing first base, I'm not going to be the catcher, right? I'm not going to be the pitcher. I'm not going to be anything else, right? So we can use a parable like that. If you're good at one thing, you don't change. If things don't change, they don't change. That's it. That's it. The covenant's forever. Torah says that many, many times, multiple times. The covenant never changes. So who says you're allowed to overstep your boundaries? The Reform movement will say I can do what I want. Torah's not binding, so I can make it up as I go along. Conservative movement, not that much different. Maybe, 5 years behind, 5 years behind the Reform movement. Okay, so they're going to say I'm going to do what I want when I want. Fine, that has nothing to do with Torah. That's not what the Torah says. They have no source. They just say, we don't believe this applies today. Okay? You don't believe it, but it doesn't matter. People, they'll say, this verse doesn't resonate with me. Okay, so what do I care? What do I care? God doesn't care what I think. Doesn't care what any of us think. You got to do what he says. And when he says it's forever, it doesn't change. Right? That's why when people overstep their boundaries, the greater the person, the greater the repercussions. That's why these cases we mentioned, their punishment is so severe. I mean, the Hasmoneans didn't understand. They weren't from the Davidic line. How do you not understand that? That's basic, Judaism 101, 101A, 101B. They're great leaders. They're great people. They're great spiritual people. There's no question. They thought they knew better. They thought God's going to understand. How is God going to understand? Over here, they did a miraculous thing. Unbelievable self-sacrifice. 100% true. But at the same time, even you want to tell me they brought stability, they brought autonomy, they brought many things to the table. Okay, right? No one's going to deny that. An unbelievable Renaissance time, let's say. Okay, very good. What's the problem? What's the problem? Problem is God said you're not from that line. And if you're not from that line, what are you thinking? What in the world are you thinking over here? Right? It's a huge problem. It's a huge problem. That's why the punishment, is so severe. But in general, 100%, in general, we can say, anytime a person thinks they know better and they want to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, and they want to change things and innovate things, what is the end result? If you would tell me the end result is it keeps people close to Torah, people are close to God, brings masses, to pray and to keep mitzvahs and all that, okay, we'll have a discussion. Be a short discussion, but we'll have a discussion. But that is never the case. That is never the case. All the inventions, all the nuances, all the changes, it's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster, right? You look at the Reform movement, conservative movement, 60% intermarriage rate, 70% intermarriage rate, an absolute disaster, total disaster, right? So, they make all kinds of innovations. Guess what? Doesn't work. Totally doesn't work. You'll tell me they're the majority right now, or unaffiliated people probably, more the majority. So what are you going to have? What kind of Judaism are we going to have, in the next generation? Going to disappear. Totally disappear. Doesn't matter what the numbers are, right? They're going to disappear over here. So therefore, I would agree in theory, we'll make all the innovations we want. Great. I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do the other thing, etc. But what's going to be the end result? What do we always want to see? We want to see that we have the ability, to the best of our ability, to be able to pass Torah down to the next generation. That's success. So in the ultra-Orthodox world, we have at least a 95% give or take success rate, right? Passing it down to the next generation. Doesn't mean people can't fall off the face of the earth, even if they got the best Jewish education. Okay, a lot of trials in this generation. Be that as it may, something that works, you stick with it. Something that doesn't work, you say, well, it was a good try. What do you mean it was a good try? Torah doesn't tell me that. The Torah says it's eternal. Torah says it's supposed to be for all generations. So how to get messed up? Because people think they know better. People think I can overstep my boundaries. I can do what I want when I want. That's not true. Totally not true. There are ways to do things the right way. There are ways, God forbid, to do it the wrong way. And if you do it the wrong way, the repercussions could be catastrophic. Absolutely catastrophic. Even with the best of intentions. Right? The best of intentions. Best of intentions doesn't matter. God doesn't care. It's what I do. It's the actions that I do. It's the actions that I perform. Am I drawing close to God or not? But again, over here, even though the Torah says priests many times, what does it mean? Does it mean they're priests from Aaron and Cohen? They come from the tribe of Levi? Or does it mean that they're leaders? It's a title of a righteous person, let's say. Right? But it doesn't come from Aaron. You have to see. You have to see what it means. But if you're going to bring a proof, you're going to bring a proof from King David himself. You're going to bring from the book of Psalms, priest this, priest that. It cannot mean in any way, shape, or form. That's where it comes from. That's come from Aaron and Cohen. It's not talking about that. Totally not talking about that. That's the context. Everything, as we always say, is in context. You want to take it out of context, use Webster's 8th definition, 5th definition, okay? Right? But that's not what it means. And that's exactly what Christians are good at. They're going to look at it and say, see, this is what applies over here. But it can't be, because that's not what it means. Right? So this idea of a priest was a title. Right? It was a title. The Melchizedek, or Shem, the son of Noah, as he was known, right, gave this title to Abraham. This title means that he's passing on this leadership to someone who's also a righteous person, who's going to take the banner of God and run with it, right, and bring God down to this world. And that's what he did, right? And he's the pillar, right? He's the root, as we mentioned. And nothing to do with sacrifices, nothing to do with the book of Leviticus, nothing to do with coming from Levi. He didn't come from Levi. Didn't come from that tribe. Right? If it didn't come from that tribe, what in the world are we talking about? Right? So that's the point. That's the point. What does it mean? Right? He's a righteous, it's the status of a righteous person. It's either, he's a leader over here. If that's what the word means, okay, I have to see it in context. I have to see it all throughout TaNaCh. Does it mean this or does it mean that? Right? If he comes from the tribe of Levi, it means like this. And that's what it means in general. When it talks about a priest, it means from the tribe of Levi. Very good. But if there's other context, doesn't mean that. Won't necessarily mean that. You have to, a person has to see. But if you just tell me this is what the word means, and even from King David, and even from that, you're going to see, they were priests. How can it be? How can it be? A person cannot overstep what they're supposed to do. Right? A man doesn't do what a woman does. A woman doesn't do what a man does. A priest, a Kohen can't do what a Levi does. Levi cannot do what a Kohen does, even though they come from the same tribe. Right? And therefore, they certainly can't do other things. Right? If they're a priest and they're serving, how can they go out to war? Right? How can they, how can they be king? They can't be king. Right? It doesn't work. But if you take someone like JC, he did everything. Right? He's a Rhodes Scholar. He was a priest. He did everything. Right? You can't. How can a person do everything over here? Can't. It's impossible. There's a hierarchy of how things are done. Right? The Torah makes clear the hierarchy and what's supposed to be done, and God forbid what's not supposed to be done. Right? But it comes with what our job is. Right? I can't do someone else's job if that's not my job. If there would be a temple, would I like to do this and do that? Yeah, I'd like to do a lot of things. Guess what? Can't. I don't come from that tribe. Right? If I came from that tribe, it'd be different. But I don't. So, but I want to be part of that tribe. And I want to do this. So that's not Torah anymore. That's, I would say Torah made up in your own mind. That's what it is. Right? It doesn't mean anything else. Right? Because it's not about what I want. It's not about what I desire. It's irrelevant. It's understanding the Torah is eternal. It means it's forever. It means it doesn't change. It means there's a covenant. So therefore, if there's a covenant, again, so the Christians will say, we're not chosen anymore. And he, JC came and fulfilled all this and he did all these things. Great. That's not true. You can't overstep who you are. You can't say, I come from this tribe when you don't. Right? That's impossible. That's an impossibility. It looks really foolish over here. To say, to say that, yeah, I'm going to do this, but you're not even part of that tribe. I want to go out and bring the incense. I want to do all these things. Okay, let me see your papers. Let me see your papers. Say you're a Kohen? No. Say your father was a Kohen? No. Say his father was a Kohen? No. So what are you doing? But I want to do it. I have this strong, I like fire. I like fire. I like incense. It's going to put me on a different level, on a different planet. Well, that's beautiful. So what? So what? If you don't have the genes, right? You don't have the right genes over here. You're not from that tribe. That's it. You can't. How can you change that? There's no way to change it. Right? There's no way to change it. And if that doesn't change, it doesn't change. Doesn't matter what I do. Doesn't matter what I think. Right? So as we always say, everything has to do with the way I see it in context. If I don't, if I just pluck it out and I say, oh, this is what it means over here, and so I'm going to apply it to 20 different things, whatever. Very good, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? If it applies, very good. If it doesn't, then I got a major problem. Even with the greatest intentions, and we mentioned earlier, even with the greatest of intentions, the repercussions catastrophic. I don't think the repercussions of death is anything worse than that. We're all going to die. We're all going to get old. Going to get older, whatever. We're all going to die. Is there anything worse than death? I mean, okay, it's a transition. Well, I'm not going to go through all that. But the point is that never should have been. We think we know better. We think, okay, I'm going to change this. I'm going to change that. It's going to bring everything to fruition. Everything's going to be great. It's not true. Right? It's not true. But not only is it not true, but the repercussions. The repercussions, as you see what happened to Hasmoneans. Hasmoneans had the greatest of intention. They went beyond what they should have done. It's mind-boggling why they think they could have done it. But what's the end result, right? That's what we're going to look at. Brass tacks, end result. What's going to be? What's going to be? They got demolished. Totally annihilated. Nothing left of them. No semblance of them. Zero. Anyone who says they come from the Hasmoneans, they're a slave. Nothing. They're zero. But they had the greatest of intention. Okay. God used them to get rid of the Greeks. Okay. Very good. But that doesn't mean I can do anything. That doesn't mean that I can usurp power, even if I have the greatest intentions. When a person at that level, and they do something like that, the repercussions are going to be much greater. Right? Obviously, you're closer to the king. Yeah, you should know better. 100% you should know better. Very, very hard to understand. It's simple, in simplicity. Very, very hard. Right? A lot of things we see, how can it be? I just throw out one other thing. You see by Korah. Korah goes against, wants to be the high priest. He thinks Moses gave it to him, gave it to Aaron and, showing favoritism, all these different things. But didn't he survive Egypt? Isn't he the one that helped carry the ark? Not everyone carried the ark, had the ability to stay alive. They had to be in a high level. So was he a fool? No, he wasn't a fool. But what happened? Jealousy. Jealousy destroyed him. So Mishnah Pirkei Avos says jealousy, honor, desire can destroy a person. As it says in ethics from our fathers, he wasn't a fool. He wasn't a dummy. No question about it. What happened? Desire got the best of him. Right? Sorry, jealousy really got the best of him. But I want to do this and I want to do that. God says, Moses says, I got everything from God. What are you talking about? I'm not using it for myself. I'm not playing favoritism. This is what God said. I want to be the high priest. I want to do this. So what happens? All his possessions, the 250 people, 250 great people that he influenced, they all got swallowed up. They all died. You don't do what you think you're allowed to do. You don't go against what God says, bottom line. But I want to do this. So what? Doesn't matter what you want to do. I want to do a lot of things. You know what? It's not going to happen. Not going to happen. Why not? I'm not allowed to. I got to stay within my boundaries. Bottom line, you don't stay within your boundaries. You think you can do whatever you want to do. It's going to be a disaster. Total, absolute disaster. And that's a wrap. Yeah.
Sorry.
Not a problem. We're gonna leave it. We're gonna leave it at that. You overstep your boundaries, you're done.
Yep,
totally done.
Yep, very true. I've been watching a lot of the comments tonight, so you're keeping this thing interesting. I'll say that.
Come on, who gets more comments than what I say?
Hey.
That's why we do this. It's controversial issues.
This is the most
I'm just looking at scrolling down. This is unbelievable. This is like non-stop. Totally non-stop. This is great.
Yep, very good.
Don't forget to hit the like button. Buy him a cup of coffee. Come on, this is great.
You go. I did get something, so $6 in here tonight. So I don't know if that was actually.
Oh, that's very good.
Just bought a cup of coffee, and so did
Don't
Wally.
forget to send me some M&Ms.
Wally Cleaver as well. Thank you both very much for that.
I want my gummy bears. Come on.
If you want Texas gummy bears, you might get more than you bargained for. I'm just not sure. So,
come on, gummy bears go very well with Sam Adams.
Oh gosh,
you got Sam Adams and gummy bears. Come on.
That is very true. That is very true. Cool. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. It's always a pleasure, and we look forward to seeing you same time, same place next week, Hashem willing. So you guys be sure to share the videos, like the video if you enjoyed this tonight, and also subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on notifications, and we'll see you next. Actually, the next show will be Sunday with Rabbi Singer if everything goes that well. So thank you, Rabbi, for your time, and thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you soon. Peace out, everybody. Thank you.
Shalom, my dear friends. Hope this message finds you well. If you like the way this channel is going, and the channel has been a blessing to you, please consider supporting the channel by going to the website, TaNaChTalk.com, TaNachTalk.com. Thank you once again for your time and for supporting TaNaCh Talk. Shalom.